I'm Amy at EuroluxHome.com. Welcome back to our historical overview of the styles of European antique furniture. If you've enjoyed this series, please remember to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and maybe even share it with a friend who might also enjoy learning about European antiques. So today we're talking about the Louis Philippe style, and behind me is a beautiful late 19th century Louis Philippe armoire. But in order to understand the Louis Philippe style, we'll need to look back and see what's going on in society. Louis Philippe himself was a French monarch that reigned from 1830 to 1848. But let's turn the clock back, all the way back to 1789, just 40 years previous, to see what's happening. And 1789, you may know that date as the year of the French Revolution. It was an extremely turbulent time. The French people had just basically had enough of the excesses of the absolute monarchy and all of the corruption and all of the spending. Louis XIV, Louis XV, and Louis XVI had thrown lavish parties. They had decorated Versailles. They had spent and spent and spent. And then Louis XVI supported us, the Americans, in our American Revolution, but that cost a lot of money. And so he taxed the people mercilessly until the people reached a breaking point. So the French people rose up against the government. Now, we also have talked about in previous videos that the 18th century was the age of enlightenment or the age of reason. So you also have this as a philosophical basis of what is spurring the French Revolution. The Enlightenment is about reason. It's about questioning authority, questioning order, questioning the social injustice that people are seeing in society. It's philosophers who are trying to better mankind. And all of these ideals then influence the rise of the people against the government in the French Revolution. So that's what happens. The people rise up. But then just almost 15 years later, by 1804, we see a new figure, Napoleon Bonaparte, who had fought on the side of the revolutionaries in the French Revolution. By 1804, he basically seizes control of the French government and crowns himself emperor. And so his style, he looks back at the Louis XVI style and then makes it even bigger. So the empire style is very tightly associated with Napoleon. I do encourage you to go back and watch our video about the empire style. But it's very flashy and dramatic, and it is meant to be a symbol of Napoleon's power. He was trying to show the people that he basically was the new Roman emperor. And so we have references to neoclassicism. We see Egyptian elements from when he went and defeated Egypt. And it's a very flashy style that's meant to, it was really public relations or marketing for him. So now what happens is we see a radical transformation in styles. If you think about what an empire piece looks like and then what this Louis Philippe piece looks like behind me, radically different. We see a profound shift in society that profoundly affects the arts and the decorative arts. So what happens? What causes this shift? Well, it's important to turn and look at the Industrial Revolution, which began at the end of the 18th century in England, specifically in the textile industry. We have advances such as the spinning jenny and the flying shuttle, which greatly increased the capacity for production. We also have the invention of the steam engine and steam power, and that changes manufacturing processes, it changes tooling, and really is fundamentally a huge change, transformation in the economy. And so the Industrial Revolution begins to spread across Europe, and by 1840, it is really firmly entrenched. It's impacting all levels of society, and we really see a flattening of society with the rise of the middle class for the first time. And so this shift, this paradigmatic shift in society, the rise of the middle class, is reflected in art. We see a new artistic movement called Realism that begins in France and begins to spread across Europe with artists such as Corot and Millet. And they are showing everyday people in their everyday lives, the ordinary life of the shepherdess or the farmer out in the fields tending to his everyday chores. It really is a great focus on the individual and the everyman. So that's what's happening in art. And I should also mention that up until this point, the furniture industry, furniture production, was always done on a bespoke basis, which means that a craftsperson would be hired to create a specific piece for the patron. And it was always just one piece or two pieces at a time, all completely done by hand. Well, now we begin to see with the rise of the Industrial Revolution a change in furniture production. But first, let's turn and talk about our figure of Louis Philippe. How did he get to the throne? So we know that in 1815, Napoleon was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, and the French people decided to restore the monarchy. So they brought back the brother of Louis XVI. Remember, they had chopped his head off. Louis XVI lost his head to the guillotine during the French Revolution. So they brought Louis XVI's brother, who was Louis XVIII, back to the throne. And then their other brother also reigned, which was Charles X, consecutively. But by 1830, the French people had had enough of the Bourbon monarchy again, and so Charles X was overthrown, and this time the French people said, we want something different. And it went to the French Parliament, and the Parliament actually chose Louis Philippe. Now, why did the Parliament choose Louis Philippe? Why was he different? Well, first of all, he did have a royal pedigree. He was the Duke of Orleans, and he was a descendant of the previous French king, Louis XIII. So way back, he was a descendant, so he did have royal blood. But he had fought on the side of the revolutionaries during the French Revolution. And until it reached the point that the reign of terror really got out of control and lots of people lost their heads. Over 16,000 people were murdered through the guillotine. And so Louis Philippe was exiled during the French Revolution, and he went to Switzerland, England, and the United States. But he came back once the monarchy had been restored. And so by this time, by 1830, the French people liked Louis Philippe, but it's the biggest reason that they elected him to be their, quote, citizen king was because he believed and he supported the idea of a constitutional monarchy. Now, up until this time in France, we had what's called an absolute monarchy. For instance, Louis XIV declared, I am the state. He was like a god. And now we have the idea of a constitutional monarchy. And what that means is that we have a parliament who is elected by the people, who has equal balance of power to the monarch. So it's a balanced government. Now, we have a great example of the English monarchy. We have Charles III, who just took the throne in England, and that is an example of a constitutional monarchy. So Louis Philippe backed this idea of a constitutional monarchy, and that is why they elected him King of the French. Now, that's a difference between King of France, which is what it had always been, the title had always been. But now it's Louis Philippe, King of the French, because he recognized that the authority truly lay with the people of France, and he was just their figurehead, the monarch, who would serve in the government at their wishes. So he became known as the bourgeois monarch. He ruled for just a little under 20 years until 1848, and his reign was really marked by peace and prosperity. He really walked the middle road, was really very moderate. But when you walk the middle road, you don't make either party happy on either side. So eventually, Louis Philippe is overthrown. But let's look now at this really revolutionary style, the Louis Philippe style, which reflects the character of Louis Philippe himself. He was very unpretentious. He did not do lavish spending, and he really avoided all of that pomp and circumstance that we had seen under the previous kings. He really focused on simplicity and functionality and really decorative arts for the everyman. So let's go look at some hallmarks of the style, and that way we'll get a better understanding of what the Louis Philippe style is all about. So the Louis Philippe style is radically different than all of the previous styles that we've seen under Louis XIV, Louis XV, Louis XVI, and under the Napoleon with the Empire style. We saw it was very fancy and ornate. Now we have a style that is very simple. It's sturdy and functional. Now behind me is one of our antique-inspired new pieces. This is our Louis Philippe sideboard. So this is a new piece, but it is meant to reflect the Louis Philippe style. We see clean lines and we have rounded edges. We have block feet. That's very characteristic of the Louis Philippe style. It's very casual and relaxed and is really meant to be more about furniture for the everyman, for that rising middle class. We have very minimal decoration. On this piece, we do have some really big hinges and our big cremone locks. We've added that to make this piece a little bit fancier. The antique pieces would not have as much hardware on them. But what we see overall is very minimal decoration. And if you find carvings at all, maybe there's a little bit of floral or some geometric shapes. But for the most part, what the Louis Philippe style is about is looking at the beauty of the wood and using the natural graining pattern of the wood to be its own decoration, which makes sense because we've talked about this rise of realism of art, and we saw artists showing the common man out in nature, working with the natural world. And so here we have a furniture style where we're focused on the actual natural wood of the piece to be its own beautiful decoration. Now we also, because we've mentioned that we've had the rise of the Industrial Revolution, furniture production itself is changing. It is no longer bespoke and just one piece made for a patron. We now have steam tools and processes that begin to use these tools in furniture production. So a very simple form of furniture will be much easier to produce. And as production increases on a larger scale, that makes the pieces more affordable and they become more accessible with the expansion of the railroad network, which is expanding this time through Europe. So it makes furniture more accessible to the everyday man, that person that is right there in the center of what's going on in society. And so this is the furniture for the common man. So let's go and we'll look at a few more pieces. So first I'll tell you about this beautiful chair. So this is a Louis Philippe office chair, and this is actually a period piece. dates probably right about 1840. It's just a really nice, has just very simple curves, very simple straight legs. There is not a lot of ornamentation. Really, we just have a little tiny bit of a scroll work there, but overall just very simple. Behind me is another example, beautiful. This is an antique armoire, dates about 1870 in the Louis Philippe style. But again, you see this clean lines, more straight clean lines, but we have the rounded edges and we have these block feet. And again, it's allowing just the beauty of the wood itself to be the decoration. And you could see that this type of furniture would be easier to manufacture. So we'll spin right around here where we started. This is just another piece, also dates right about 1870. And I think now you really can see the essence of the Louis Philippe style. It's simple, it's sturdy, it's functional, it has clean lines, rounded edges, very minimal decoration. Even the hardware here is made of wood. So we don't have the metal escutcheons. It's just very simple wooden peg construction and just allowing the natural grain of the wood to be its own decoration. Now, we've talked about that this style, the Louis Philippe style, began in France because Louis Philippe himself was on the throne in France. But these ideas of the focus of the everyday man, the rise of the middle class, spread throughout Europe with the spread of the Industrial Revolution. And we've talked about how styles develop in their own regions. And so I do want to mention the Biedermeier style because it's really this same aesthetic as the Louis Philippe style. But if we turn and look at what happens in Germany, the Germans themselves would talk about a fictional middle-class German named Gottlieb Biedermeier. And he was like we would say, John Smith in America. So he was the everyday common man. And so the Biedermeier style was the common man's style, just like the Louis Philippe was meant to be very simple and elegant and for the everyday man. So I hope that you have greatly enjoyed learning about the Louis Philippe style. I think maybe when you're out antiquing, you might be able to really recognize this style and its contemporary style, the Biedermeier style, located in Germany. Please let me know if I can answer any questions for you. Remember to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and maybe even share it with a friend. See you next time.